Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Colleen Meyer with Meyer and Mintz LLC, bringing you Fearless and Pink. And today we have a wonderful, interesting, amazing guest, Helena Lucia. And she is the founder and host of the amazing podcast,
SISU Journey.
SISU Journey. So tell us what SISU Journey is and how you came up with that name. I'm very interested.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me. First, I'm honored to be here. So SISU is a Finnish word. It's a mindset word. My mom's from Finland. My DNA is 97% Finnish when I got it done on 23andMe. So I'm pretty much a thoroughbred. And I've always loved the word SISU. SISU means resilience in the face of extreme adversity. You know, they say it's like doesn't have a direct translation in English, but it's really it encapsulates kind of an energy of tenacity and resilience and strength and courage and all of that in one. So SISU Journey became the name of my business, my coaching business, and my speaking and my podcast, because I feel like we're all kind of on some point of this resilience journey. And that's kind of what I want to highlight in the stories and the science that we talk about.
I love that. And I think that's powerful. I think that speaks to now what's going on in the world now coming out of COVID. When did you get interested in creating this podcast and creating this coaching business? Or was there one distinct moment where you said, this is something I want to do? Or was it something that happened over time?
I would say both. I spent about 15 to 20 years working through therapy to deal with, the sexual, emotional, psychological, and spiritual trauma that I went through in childhood. I was the sixth of 10 children. I was born and raised in a fundamentalist religious cult. And I just had a lot of abuse and trauma and shame to unravel and work on in therapy. So I spent, a good chunk of my life working through it in therapy with this idea that at some point I would have arrived. And it was about 2019 when I realized that I am just much sicker than I still should be after all this work, working on my conscious mind, and I had an excellent therapist, and she did some EMDR, and we did a lot of trauma work together. But I just felt like there was maybe some pieces missing. And so I went on this quest. I decided 2020 was going to be the year of the health. I put my flag in the sand. I tried everything. So it was the first time in my life where I had the financial means to try to start throwing money at the problem. So I hired a psychedelic coach. I did some intense plant medicine journeys. I hired a functional medicine person to deal with the physical body. I hired hypnotherapy to deal with the subconscious. I just started finding coaches and mentors and kind of opening up to the universe to provide me support I needed. And then as an engineer, I started figuring out what was working for me now and what hadn't worked in the past, what was missing. And that's when kind of my coaching practice started being built out of that, realizing that if I had known about the nervous system, if I had known about the subconscious, if I had known about energetics, and then had those support pieces in place much earlier, that my whole story would have been so different. And that's where the SISU Journey podcast and SISU Journey, the business, were born from.
It's amazing to hear your story. It's for you to say, I'm going to find a way to, deal with these things through my body, through, my subconscious, through, my spiritual being. I think that's amazing, because a lot of people, I think, don't, if they even bother going to therapy, they don't take it to all those different levels of your being so that you can be overall healthy. That is so important.
Yeah. And I do also think that there are group of people maybe that might be resistant to that, but another group of people who just don't know what those tools are, right? And then as I was watching 2020, kind of implode on itself and develop this mental health crisis that we're in right now, and I was like, gosh, we need to get ready to support these people. Our healthcare system, our current, medical system, all of the things that are available are really not prepared. And so that was that sense of urgency that really kind of lit a fire under me. And then the podcast itself was a little bit of a different story. It sounds like maybe is similar to the story of the origin story of Fearless in Pink, in that I recognize that we have this curse of separateness in our society. And so the pandemic was going on, people are lonely, and what really unites us is that we're not alone in our story. None of our narratives are unique. We've all learned things, we've developed things. Indigenous culture has done this for thousands of years, and sharing stories through, storing tradition and wisdom through story. But we don't really do a very good job of it in our culture. And so science and stories of resilience were really kind of like, if people are struggling, if people are alone in their, eating disorder or mental health issues, or, gender dysphoria, or whatever they're struggling with, someone else can share a story of what they used when they went through that, what their, turning points were, what those special moments were, and really kind of support and build each other up. In fact, I just spoke with a young lady right before this call, and she shared the story of having to be a caretaker for her dad at the age of 18 and to start parenting a parent effectively, and what that long drawn out grief process was like. And as I was listening to her tell her story, I was just amazed by the thought of how many other people will hear her story and be able to kind of understand that those thoughts that they had during the grief, weren't weird at all, or that their experience is not just one, but it's one of many.
I think that I agree with you. Coming into 2020 and this pandemic, we were not ready for this. We weren't prepared. And I can, my mother, who's 85 years old, she can't have a bunch of visitors. She's very social. And that whole thing, like you were talking about, of loneliness, and out of that loneliness comes, starts to create mental health issues. And then it becomes a spiraling down out of control. And plus all these other things that are happening. But I think, you tell me what you think. I think that mental health, people are starting to embrace that it's okay to seek help.
Absolutely. And our young generation is doing a really great job making that, bringing that to the forefront. I'd love to see some more movement in the direction of not pathologizing all of these things that are natural responses to trauma, but actually supporting people to heal instead of giving them, a label, but actually supporting them to start healing their trauma, healing their nervous system, healing their subconscious, healing their psyche, their mind, mind, body, soul, spirit, and getting that trauma out of their body so that they can flourish and thrive.
Now, what is your typical customer that comes to you with as a coach? Is it somebody who's been through, multiple traumas, single trauma? I'm not discounting, a single trauma, because, they can be horrific. But what are you seeing overall of people coming to you and asking for you to help them through that time in their life that's a struggle?
Yeah, so most people that I tend to see have been people who have tried a few things. They've been to a few therapists, they've been to, they've tried some things, they've taken some courses, and they just haven't been finding kind of the relief they've had. Most of people that I see are empaths, and empaths are a really interesting and unique type of person, because they've learned to kind of throw their energy around to make sure that everybody in the home is okay and all of their and so really helping them focus on learning how to collect their energetics and make sure that they're not taking on other people's pain and trauma, learning how to set really good boundaries. And so, I mean, I do think it's, you know, I'm open to seeing all genders, all, you know, all types of people, but for the most part, it's people that are, you know, at least about 35-ish, you know, and have just tried a few things and done, you know, done their best. You know, people are really struggling. People are struggling in a cycle of like, you know, alcohol use or using other things to regulate their nervous system. And that's kind of, you know, the type of person that that I see as this someone who is really in feeling stuck, but has like limitless potential, you know, and just needs a few tweaks to help support them to just live this, you know, abundant, beautiful life.
You know, what you said to me right now makes sense, because I think a lot of people self-medicate, you know, with either drugs or alcohol. And I feel bad, because it seems to me that they're making this cycle worse, but I don't think they know how to get out of this cycle. You know, it's round and around and around.
Well, a really interesting thing is that we are actually, you know, using the alcohol or other drugs. Alcohol is a very powerful drug. I feel like we've socially accepted maybe the wrong drugs for our nervous system in this culture, but yeah, alcohol is a very, very hard on your nervous system. And so we've been socialized to use alcohol to regulate our nervous system, to use it to relax, to use it to sleep, to do all of these things. And then when we go through trauma, like the last year and a half of the pandemic, it's a very, very natural response. Their mind is doing exactly what it should be by creating this nostalgic relationship with alcohol and really cementing that into the brain. And so that's one thing that I really want to point out, is that there's no shame in getting stuck in this pattern, because your brain is working exactly like it's supposed to. It's responding to alcohol exactly as it should. And removing that, that pattern is easier than you think. It's more, and there's it's exactly what you were told to do. You're doing what you were told to do, and now you get stuck. And so we have this thing where it's like, oh, you should drink a lot until it's bad, and you have to figure out where that line is, and that's not possible when people are going through trauma.
You know what else I think too, what people used to self-medicate trauma is food.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one thing that I don't focus on initially, and I'll tell you why. I really focus on self-compassion and really nurturing the self. And in our culture, we have such a strong emphasis toward diet culture and towards extremes, that I really focus on giving your body everything that it wants while you're bringing your nervous system to safety. Once your nervous system is in safety, then it's okay to start talking about nutrition and things like that in a healthy context, if you understand the person. But we never focus on weight loss. We're all about intuitive eating, against, you know, the diet culture mentality and things like that. But yeah, definitely there's a time for nutrition, but it's not when your body is running from a lion. It's once you've been brought to safety, then you can talk about really starting to give some of those nurturing foods that are going to give you the maximum for yourself, and to understand how that cycle of eating maybe isn't serving you. But yeah, I really, that is one direction that we
don't go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my daughter is the same way. She wrote her master's thesis on weight loss and, you know, fat shaming and diet shaming and all of these things. So
amazing.
Yeah, she's right there with you on that. Now, let's talk about when you first started this journey into being a coach and starting your podcast. If you could go back, what would you do differently?
I would set lower expectations on myself. I have a tendency to like create really rigid deadlines and really, unrealistic goals, and then start to feel the self-imposed pressure of those. And recognizing that the work I'm doing, it's so important that I continue to keep space and continue to have this like expansive feeling. I have been forcing that space into my business, into my life. But I do recognize that I didn't initially leave enough space in there to, I was like, oh, I'll, 2 weeks to start a podcast. And then, and that just didn't end up being feasible and realistic. And it didn't end up being even, good. Like it needs to be born. It's like having a baby. A baby needs 9 months. Nobody gets to say, okay, well, we're going to put, 9 women in a room, each one gets to be pregnant for a month, and then we're going to have a baby, right? You have to have the whole 9 months.
Yeah, in order to create the plan, the launch, and what I find about business is, even if you have the time, and you have your SWOT analysis, and you have all this stuff that you've done to get your business from point A to point B, there's always going to be some kind of rabbit trail that takes you off somewhere, or you have to readjust and pivot, just like we had to do with COVID.
Right. Yeah. And it's meant to be that way too, because we're dynamic people and our journey is circuitous, and it has a lot of, ups and downs, and a business is an entity just like that, and it needs space to breathe and to develop, and for magic to happen, and for, all these opportunities. And you can't make space for that when you're just filling your day with, tasks.
That's so true. And you have to make room for mental health to unwind. And I think that's part of my problem is sometimes, I'll work 7 days but there's no downtime. So I really, even if I'm saying, okay, I'm not going to work, I'm going to read, but I'm going to read something that has to do with work.
Right.
So, it's not really downtime for your mental health.
Yeah, being able to disconnect is really, really important. And for me, having a morning ritual that takes precedence over my daytime activities, choosing the top 3 things that I need to do that day that are aligned with my, my identity. I use identity-based goal setting with my clients. So we really set an identity instead of moving toward like process goals. We set an identity, and we move toward that. And so, so the other thing that I've been working with a coach who does cyclical things. And so she works with folks to get their business on a cycle, either if they are, a woman or person that's menstruating on that cycle, or on the moon cycle, because everyone cycles. And so there has to be these times of waxing and waning in your business as well. And to be able to move with that creates a lot more space.
I think that's interesting, because businesses do that. They wax and they wane, they grow and they slow. It's, and I think people don't understand that, and they expect, and businesses have seasons, right? So, you have your first quarter. I work for a company where our first quarter, the fourth quarter of the year, and the first quarter of the year were the same, flat. But as we go in through the second quarter into the summer, it picks up, just based on the industry trends, based on the industry flows. So it's all of these things. And I remember talking to a business owner, and he says, well, I want it here. I want it here. So I told him we need to look at growth year over year, because the cycle, it's not the same cycle as you're moving through the calendar year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When someone comes to you for coaching, what do you feel is the toughest hurdle for? I know it's going to be different with everybody, but is there one little hurdle that you say, this is the one that we always get that block and then we have to work over? Is there one like that with your clients?
I would say connecting with our bodies. We go through life so disconnected these days that being able to actually connect into the emotional body, the felt sense of the body, can be a real challenge. And so in getting through that, we use tools like grounding and meditation and all of that. But one of the things that I encourage my clients to do in moving past that is the actual portal to connecting with your body is your dreams. Your subconscious brings that felt sense smack into your face, right there in the morning. So if you can stay in that space and record that dream, and I can do dream work with a client, and then we can actually get right into the nitty gritty of whatever their subconscious is trying to process through. And that's where I've seen that's where I think the most challenging pieces, but that's where I've seen some of the most amazing shifts is in that connecting, doing the dream work to connect the felt sense of the body into the whatever their subconscious is trying to work through, and connecting those two together. And we can do that with recurring dreams, and you can do that with even a remembered part. But if I help them to create a practice of recording their dreams, staying in the energy of that moment, it becomes even more potent and powerful.
I have a friend of mine that always recommends that we write down our dreams, because isn't it Sigmund Freud, he called it an id. I think he called it an id, and which is your subconscious. And your subconscious, now I'm going to paraphrase his theories, like you were saying, it's trying to, there's a lot of stuff going on back there where we don't see, and it's going to manifest itself, dreams, whatever how it manifests itself.
Yeah. And a lot of times people want to process it through as like, what did that dream mean for other people? In other words, like, oh, well, I'm going to look up on the internet to find out what a yellow tree symbolizes, right?
Right.
But what I've found is that going into the felt sense, going into that little tiny moment where you had the strongest emotion in that dream, going into those characters that were in the dream, who was around you, what environment you were in, how do you know where you were, all of that stuff. Those are actually the keys to figuring out what that dream means for you, not necessarily what it means for the larger, Google verse, but what does it mean for you?
That's exactly right. I think people ask a lot of questions of others instead of asking a lot of questions to themselves. Do you have your clients and your customers, you have them journal?
Yes, I use have you heard of a morning page? The morning pages. So Julia Cameron, she wrote the book The Artist's Way, and she coined this phrase morning pages. And basically what that is she suggests you get up, you write 3 pages of just whatever is on your mind. No one's supposed to ever read it. It's supposed to be completely unedited. And I consider it kind of as like clearing the clutter of your mind, and you never know what's going to come out in that morning page. And so I do encourage my clients to start out with 1 page, just because I am really in the business of setting very small incremental changes that, expand over time, right? So, start out something easy, meditate for a minute, right? Do a morning page, do your dream journal. And so, yeah, I definitely encourage them to do that journaling, and then any type of gratitude practice at night. But yes, journaling is definitely encouraged. And it doesn't have to be written journaling. It could be written. It could be on a Google Doc. It could be on a voice recorder. It could be drawing, right? So for people who are creative and have a lot of energy that way, it could be drawing, painting. That could be journaling. They could express themselves that way. So I really also am against a one size fits all model. And so that what I do try to do practice of is saying, hey, if you would like to, you can read this book, but this author also has an interview on YouTube. If you'd prefer to watch an interview of this YouTube, they basically have a synopsis of the whole book for you. And so to use those different learning styles, those different ways of accessing and leveraging information to create your own practice of resilience, not my practice, not Colleen's practice, but your practice, right?
That is, I love that. I love that, love that, because people can come to you and move at their own pace. And that's important. I had a daughter that went to therapy. She still goes to therapy. I think it's healthy. I think it's, you work through things with a therapist, a coach, as long as you get out there and you take the time to take those steps, find the right person. I think a lot of people, you would be the right person because you individualize it. You've been there. You understand what they're going through. You know what we're talking about. And you have a whole system set up. And I think these are good things for people that are going through, either mental health or trauma.
Yeah. And just to be clear, a lot of my clients continue to do trauma therapy with a therapist. Like I don't dig into these past traumas. That's not in my purview. I'm very trauma informed, but I'm focusing on the future. And then what limiting beliefs and things like that come up, we clear those. So and we do EFT, and we'll go into traumas. I'm not at all afraid of going into traumas. A lot of coaches are, but I also recognize that I don't do EMDR. I don't, process through trauma with someone per se, but this is more of like an adjunct. This will actually help accelerate your work in therapy, because this is how you turn that work into a practice, into a resilience practice that helps you be able to bend with whatever happens in your life.
I love that. I do. I love that. So let's say somebody's listening or somebody's watching and they say, I have to get a hold of her. How can they do that?
Yeah, so I'm available through SISUJourney.com. It's SISUJourney. And at SISUJourney.com, I'm doing an identity-based goals masterclass at the end of August 23rd through 27th. So they can sign up for that, or they can sign up for a free chemistry call and we'll just chat. I'll see where they are. And if I really think, one of the other coaches that I work with would be a better fit for whatever they're working on in their life, I will refer them out, or I will, we'll talk about how we can work together. So very, very open to just chatting about any of the topics that we've talked today.
And I'll make sure that we put all your information on the YouTube channel and on our podcast and on our Facebook. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on Fearless in Pink. And we appreciate you coming and speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.